of Africa. Most of it is the desert land for the geography. For religion, they're polytheistic, so they believed in many gods. For example, Ra for sun, and Anubis. Oh, and the pharaoh was in charge of the religion. For leaders, they had Cleopatra, King Tutankhamun, Ptolemy the First, and Owen, and the leaders are always in charge of the laws and religions. Most of the buildings were made from sandstone. Most of the buildings and pyramids were made from slaves, such as the Jews.
Remember we talked about that might not be as historically accurate as we thought? Possibly. Always thinking like a historian.
Yeah. The written language of the Egyptians was hieroglyphics. It is thought to be that hieroglyphics was like the first written language out of all, and it's early Demotic.
What does that mean? If you wrote it, you should know what it means. What's older than hieroglyphics did we find out though? Cuneiform. Fabulous. We found out that's a little bit older. Yeah. All right, so.
Alright. So for my project, I did the Hittites. So their geography was they were located in Anatolia, which is modern day Turkey, and they were a fortress city that resided on top of a hill. So they used their height to their advantage, and when they were getting attacked and stuff. And their rocky terrain also gave them a lot of iron, so they used that. Started the Iron Age. The government was the first constitutional monarchy in the world, and the king ruled with the help of assembly, who took care of most of the judicial affairs. And officials had independent authority over various branches of government. For their war tactics, one of their advantages were that their weapons were superior to others, like they had iron, others used bronze. And their main tactic was use chariots, and chariots had a driver and attacker. So there were two people on one, and they were both protected, so it just gave them that extra advantage. And their main style of attacking was ambush. Their religion, the Hittites were polytheistic, which means they worshipped more than one god. And the Hittites adopted these from places they took over. So they worshipped over 1,000 different gods that they met from each culture. Their inventions was, their major invention was, making iron. They were the first to smelt iron ore. And they invented the chariot, which gave them a huge advantage in war. And yeah, that is the Hittites.
Yes.
I did the Kingdom of Kush, and the geography. Kush had many small kingdoms throughout the whole empire, and they were all governed within themselves. And the priests were like the highest up in all of the ranks of the everything. And females were in power, and I thought that was really cool because, women are the best. So the inventions of the time were like pretty advanced for how far long ago it was. And they had blast furnaces, and they smelted everything into the form of like a tower, and a blast compressed the air, And yeah. And ironworking was a thing back then as well. And they used iron to repair buildings and like make weapons. And they had animal-driven water wheels, which I thought was neat because water wheels and animals and stuff. Some interesting facts. Farmers were very respected because without them, everybody would die. And they relied on them to eat. And iron and gold were very, very important in Kush culture. In battle, they were very famous for their archery and their, you know...
You're right. It's okay, you're fine.
I'm nervous.
We talked about that. They're bows and arrows.
Their archery skills. Right. They're famous for that. And their religion. They had very similar religion to the Egyptians, except they had like a few more gods. One of them was a lion god named Apendamak, and the Nubians did not mummify their dead's remains like the Egyptians did. And they built pyramids similar to Egypt, but they were smaller.
There is a new proposed amendment. Section 1. The right of a citizen of the United States to serve as president or vice president, whether naturalized or natural born, shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state. Section 2. The Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. Section 3. This article is proposed as an amendment to the Constitution of the United States, which shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of the Constitution when ratified by the legislators of 3/4 of the several states within 7 years from the date of its submission by the Congress. Section 4. This amendment shall take effect 2 years after the date of ratification. I agree with this amendment because being from another country it doesn't necessarily mean you're not fit to be president, so you should not be denied the chance.
I also agree with this amendment, but I would choose to change it a bit in that you would add a section where it would state that if you were not natural born U.S. citizen to run for president, you would have to have lived here for 24 years instead of the original 14. So this would mean if for some reason you ran for president at 35, which is the minimum age, then you just would have had to live here every single year since you were 11. And it'll prove to everyone your commitment to the United States.
So with Stone's amendment, I agree with it. I think that, I agree with this amendment. I think that to be a U.S. citizen, you should also grow up in the United States and learn what it's like to be youth all the way to middle age to whenever you want to be president. I think that's crucial to understanding how our nation works, because from the outside, like other nations, they have their views of our country, and if you come in, live here for a little bit, and then run for president, I believe that you'll still have those views of the other country. Whereas if you've lived here for long enough, you'll kind of understand how our nation works and how we treat each other and our customs and all of those important things.
I disagree with the amendment because I don't want a terrorist from Arabia coming and becoming president, or a Chinese spy invading the U.S. and then China would have power over the president.
Okay, I'm just gonna completely disregard what he said, but anyways, I think that the amendment should be passed because I think everybody should have an equal opportunity to run for president if they so wish to, and it could cause more immigrants or people who weren't natural born to become more involved in politics and that kind of stuff.
I agree with this amendment because I feel like it'd bring attention back to the politics.
I agree with this amendment. And to elaborate on what Mr. Briggs said, I think the presidential election is a very thorough thing that's done, and you find out a lot of dirt on each candidate. So if they were a terrorist from Arabia or a Chinese spy, it would be found out pretty fast.
I think that everybody had a point in this debate, but I am for the amendment and against it at the same time. I think that it could use some more constructing, and that people from different countries have a different viewpoint on how America looks from the outside. So the people that are more worldly and have an international mindset could become president here, but also there is, what Briggs said, the chance that they could be after something else and they could take advantage of this amendment. And yeah.
Community,
Yeah.
which was not really democracy, but we're starting to think it's not just one person in charge.
Order of this legislative president.
Right.
You don't have to put an order for the like ideas and concepts.
I know, letters to the president's like an actual letter. Yeah, we figure something out. Very much.
Would you put any of the wars as like a
Any of the Indian Wars?
yeah, as like a segue into the raise of taxes?
That's a really good question.
Well,
Could you?
I mean, the wars that they had were. Oh, thank you.
What about the wars over in England? Like because they had like all the wars in all the different kingdoms, so England was sort of like in constant conflict, and they needed more money from their colonies to support them, which definitely led to the beginning of like not neglect but abuse, I'd say.
What about the Boston Tea Party? Was that, didn't Zinn talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, she discussed.
And what are some details about that you could, I mean, that was quite an act of defiance, don't you think? What was something that you can pull out of Zinn about that? Because he had a very different take on it than what we were taught back in 4th grade, U.S. history. What did you say?
Like they would take something that belonged to the British, that would not really necessarily hurt them, but like it would.
Well, I think it was a really like the way they snuck up at night and they took over the ship.
Very mischievous.
It was mischievous, but it was also so bold. Do you think?
Oh, absolutely.
5 and 6. There you go, boys.
Yeah.
Like it was an act. You talk about an act. That was definitely an act.
So what do you think are the biggest, like what overall concepts are the biggest for the revolution?
Their idea of their own identity. Oh wait, wasn't it?
Yes, we can, yeah. You guys definitely have to keep thinking about that identity. That identity. We're not
there was
British
something
anymore.
where he said they need to throw away the ideals of. Who was it?
Oh, that's the one that was in the DBQ. Do you guys have your DBQ? Does anybody have it? The one that the practice one you guys did?
I wrote my essay. I have my essay in my notebook.
Yeah. See what you.
The actual document though.
No, because that was one of in that first practice DBQ. You guys, that one was really good because remember we said he started actually mentioning us like, We're not just British colonists. We might be something else.
Oh, I know. So they were talking about how, like, I'm not, like, we moved away from the British, so what are we now? So he was really like, he was also saying about how
was that really intense?
Like the British, like the poor and the rich were mixed together, and that they weren't, separated. That everybody was one. Everybody was one as a, like, everybody was one unit as, like, rather than separated and, like,
exactly.
Rich. So like
he was a preacher though, but it wasn't Penn. But Penn had some other good stuff too.
He was
Can you give us a hint?
It was a royal government.
Nobody has their DPQ with them?
Wait,
I thought you guys were keeping your papers together.
If I was.
So, but I like everything you're going with, because think about how each section of colonies designed themselves separately and differently. Remember how Penn's rules were very unique to England, about everybody having religious freedom. You could have whatever freedom you wanted as long as you practiced some form of Christianity. So he put a little bit of a restriction on it, but
what is an American?
that's it. Yeah. Oh my gosh, put that down. That one's so good. Thank you for having that. Let me see. That's a really good one, because that's the first time we hear that term. What is an American? He was remember guys, he was a farmer.
Yes, he was.
So my element was magnesium. The slogan is East or West, magnesium is the best, and the 3 uses for magnesium is electronics, power tools, and luggage.
My element is oxygen. The slogan is, we breathe it but we don't release it. It is used for reducing metal, submarines, and diving.
My element was silver, and they are not on good terms with the diner. My uses were jewelry, mirrors, and it's a great electrical conductor.
My element is xenon. I'm gonna cry. It's a non-metal and a gas. Yeah, that's it.
Mine is radium. My slogan is shine as bright as radium, and the main use for it is radiotherapy.
My element is sodium. Don't eat without chlorine, or well, you'll die. The 3 main uses are table salt, street lights, and de-icing roads.
My element was nitrogen. The slogan is no one is cooler than me. And its main uses are industrial waste and keratosis.
My element is sulfur. The slogan is when I smell sulfur, I sulfur. And then the uses is it is in manufacturing, fabrication, and it is used in gunpowder, black gunpowder.
Our mannequin, Requise Jr. So you label all the bones of the body. So here we have the metatarsals, which are the bones in the feet, and then you have all the bones from cervical, scapula to the spinal column all the way down to the feet. So we just labeled them, wrote them out, and stuck them on there.
Buenas tardes, amigos. Good afternoon, friends.
Dame un lápiz. Give me a pencil. Paul Espinata. Mi nombre es Gaz.
¿Cómo estás?
Muy bien, ¿y tú?
Bienvenidos.
Bienvenidos. Welcome.
Je me llamo Miss Oran.
My name is Miss Oran.
Me gusta español. I like Spanish. Voy al baño means I'm going to the bathroom.
De nada means you're welcome.
Adios means bye.
Gracias means thank you.
Buenos dias means good morning.
Flor means flower. Hola means hello. Con permiso means excuse me. Por favor means thank you.
¿Cómo estás means how are you?
Mistakes are almost always of a sacred nature, understand them thoroughly. Salvador Dali.
There is more power in telling little than in telling all. Mark Rothko.
When the subject is healthy, simplicity is the only way to see it. Jacob Lawrence.
Art is what you can get away with. Andy Warhol.
We live in a rainbow of chaos, Paul Cézanne.
Everything moves, everything changes, everything moves, everything revolves, everything goes and must fly away. Frida Kahlo.
Forget yourself. Yayoi Kusumi.
Clint said, "Truth is like fire." It means to glow and burn.
Jean Michael Basquiat said, "I'm not a black artist, I'm just an artist."
Pablo Picasso said, "Every child is an artist."
Paul Logan said, "Art is either plagiarism or revolution." Amadeo Manhani said, "It is your duty in life to save your dream."
Marcel Duchamp said that art is either plagiarism or revolution.
Andy Warhol said, "Art is what you can get away with." Basquiat, "I'm not a black artist, I'm an artist." Clement always said, "Truth is like fire, to tell the truth means to glow and burn." Mom Diva said, "It is your duty in life to save your dream." Stephen Hawking said, "You grow small by trying to grow great."